Hi, hello. Welcome to the episode of Isaiah's Newsstand. It's your host, Isaiah Edwards. The date is June the 27th, 2025. Hopefully, this episode finds you well, in good spirits, and high hopes. As for me, I'm doing pretty good. Happy Friday to ya. Hopefully this energy catches you well. Hopefully things feel Friday for you today. And if you're not listening to this on a Friday, that's okay. Hopefully things feel Friday on a Monday. Hopefully that good Friday vibe just catches ya, fills you up. But yeah, no, this has actually been a solid day so far. I am recording a bit earlier than usual. I took the day off. I know I said I wasn't going to do that anymore, but things came up. So let me just go ahead and dive into what my plan was for the day, how things unfolded for me. So after finding a way to accrue a good chunk of money that I wasn't happy to have to do, but I was just happy to get, it is what it is. I was like, okay, now I have the means to fix my screechy squealy brakes. All right, let's go ahead and try to execute that before the problem gets worse, right? Makes sense. So we scheduled off for the day, and I proceeded to go to a different place, a place called like Brakes for Less. That was initially my plan, right? And I've never been there before. I didn't know how far I was going to be. But I was like, okay, hopefully they have set lower prices. I'm going to save as much money as I can for this. Maybe it's worth, trying it out. I proceed to, get out on the road, and I'm going, and I'm like looking at the directions. I'm like, okay, I've made a mistake. Just because it was way too far out. It then meant that I'm like, it's later in the day already. So I was like, I should have been up and early sooner. I should have not maybe gone to this place. I'm already second guessing myself. Sure enough, I get to the spot and they tell me, hey, we're pretty booked for the day. You can come through tomorrow, and I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do that. So I immediately go into a scramble mode. Like, I got to find a place to get my brakes looked at today. Like, that was the whole point. That was the whole purpose of this. So I go down the street to, I believe, an Express Pro, which ironically there's an Express Pro right down the street from me. So it's like, damn, could have just done that. That's almost like a full circle head ass moment for me. But, I go in there. It also looks busy, and I'm like, frap. Well, hopefully they can at least take me. And the guy goes, hey, we can get you. It's just going to be about a few hours. And I'm like, look, that's probably the best answer I'm going to give for the day. I just want to get my brakes fixed. Sounds good. So, give him the key. I'm hanging out for maybe no more than, it wasn't even more than 30 minutes, like maybe 15. Another guy comes out, and he proceeds to tell me, he's like, hey man, so we looked at your brakes. Everything seems fine. And I'm like, huh? And, I proceed to give him another full rundown of the things I was experiencing with the car, with, every time I was hitting the brakes and stuff like that. And he goes, I mean, yeah, like I hear what you're saying, but every part that I was able to look at seems okay. So I don't want to change your brakes out for no reason, right? And I'm like, yeah, no, that makes sense, man. Like, you're talking facts. This makes sense. And I proceed to go, oh, well, how much do I owe you for I don't know, the diagnostic or whatever? He's like, it's fine. I'll just wheel it up for you. So that was some G shit from the mechanic. I mean, granted, am I stoked that my brakes are making this noise? It's going to be annoying and also worry me. No, I'm not stoked. But the guy was like, hey, of course, if there is any problems, you can always come back. Now, granted, I'm probably not going to go, all the way up to that Express Pro. But, it seems like overall things are all right. I'll take that assessment and drive with it. You know what I mean? And, I'll try to, more or less just trying to consolidate the money that I have into other things that I needed to get paid off or do whatever. So I'm chalking this up as good news. It was a bit odd, a bit different, annoying in a way that I'm still stuck with these squeaky, screechy brakes. But if the brakes are working fine and they're in good shape and good order, then that's awesome. It's kind of breaking my curse of, buying a new car and then, within 3 months, something goes down. Now, let me knock on wood. Hopefully it's not 6 months, something goes down. I want this thing to run and be steady and be smooth, for at least a while, right? But yeah, so I'm counting this out as a win. So that's how my day started. I came back home. I reconnoitered for a little bit. Went out to the gym. Gym went well. It was a heavy session. So, all the sets were heavier than usual, and I was able to hit some like PRs, so that was good. We love when we break some records for ourselves. Even if they're small, even if they're tiny, I still, I'm like, hey, that's awesome. That's growth. So overall, it's been a good day. Maybe the snag or the caveat so far is that my internet went out. There was like this flash storm, and for a quick second, the power went out, and I was like, uh-oh, that's not good. And then the internet was just down, and it's just been out since. So that's a bit of a bummer, but I think this episode should be recording okay, should be fine, should be good to go there. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into some news, and or let's go ahead and do our startup, and then we can get into some news. All right. Our first story comes from Al Jazeera. Israeli attacks kill 71 people, including aid seekers, across Gaza. At least 71 people have been killed in Israeli attacks across Gaza since dawn. 2 infants died of malnutrition in the enclave. Prime Minister Netanyahu said the ceasefire with Iran opens up the door to normalization agreements, spiking concerns of Palestinians again being sidelined. It's crazy that, once again, like, we have this, conflict that re-sparked up when Israel went after Iran, started bombing them. And it's like, okay, so now what? You still have this ongoing genocide that you're doing in Gaza. That's still been happening the whole time. So is there going to be any resolution to that? And essentially Netanyahu just more or less finds a way to sidestep that conversation with this normalization thing, which is essentially saying, hey, how do we get Israel more or less on equal playing field, equal footing, so that you guys don't keep attacking us? And it's like, dude, you guys are literally blowing people up as we speak. You are depriving people of food. You're occupying a whole place, whole region. And they're, a whole spot, whole country, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say here. And it's like, yeah, we know, but we're trying to get rid of Hamas. You know how it goes. Like, the same rigmarole just gets rolled the fuck out while they continue to kill people. Now, the food aid, which has now become the default with the Gaza humanitarian fund shit, which is backed by the U.S., that has kind of flickered on and off for a day or two, just because the same thing keeps happening where people keep trying to do the best that they can to get at least a little bit of food and wind up dying trying. So, that's still an ongoing issue. And then also, I believe in the West Bank part, I believe it's called Kafir Malik, there was a report of settler violence in which 3 people were killed. So, yeah, and of course, I think the defense used there was like, well, they were throwing rocks and there was like a gun, and people were like, we threw rocks in self-defense when these people came armed with IDF escorts trying to take our land. So, we tried to defend ourselves the best we could, and we were murdered for it. So, I mean, sadly, the beat goes on. I know we spent a whole week talking about Iran and Israel, and that's still an ongoing thing, of course, as well as all of the, the conflicts that are going on in the Middle East, centering with Israel. I know we're going to keep talking about this shit. It is sad, and it's unfortunate that it's allowed to go on happening. That, the U.S. is just going to be like, no, we're fine with this. We're going to keep supporting it. We're just going to keep moving along with it. Anyway, let's move on, though, to our next story. Excuse me. From CNN. Japan executes Twitter killer who murdered and dismembered 9 people. Japan has executed a man dubbed the Twitter killer, who was convicted of murdering and dismembering 9 people, mostly women, in the country's first use of capital punishment in nearly 3 years. Takahiro Shiraishi, 34, was hanged Friday at the Tokyo detention house. He was sentenced to death in 2020 after pleading guilty to killing 9 people, 8 women and 1 man. Shiraishi was arrested in October of 2017 after police searched his home in the city of Zama in Kanagawa Prefecture on the outskirts of Tokyo to investigate the disappearance of a 23-year-old woman who had expressed suicidal thoughts on social media, including Twitter, now known as X. 3 cooler boxes and 5 containers were found in Shiraishi's room containing human heads and bones with the flesh scraped off. CNN affiliate TV, I'm getting this wrong, Asahi reported at the time, citing police sources. The high-profile mass murder case had gripped the nation for years and raised concerns over the use of social media. The 9 victims were aged between 15 and 26, according to the Japanese public broadcaster NHK and TV Aishi, which both cited court proceedings. The victims had posted online that they wanted to kill themselves and were subsequently contacted by Shiraishi through social media platforms. Using a handle which loosely translates as hangman, Shiraishi invited them to his apartment in Zama, promising to help them die, the GG news agency reported. Shiraishi pleaded guilty to murdering the victim, saying in court he had killed them to satisfy his own sexual desires. Which I think was something that it even railroaded his defense, because I think they were trying to plead a sense of he was trying to help these people, pass on. They had problems, their lives were complicated and tough, and he was trying to help out in that way. And it's he even comes out and goes, "No, I was getting, satisfaction out of this, sexual satisfaction, gratification. I was doing this for me." And even to the point of financial gratification, which is crazy. I'm this dude was just killing people. He was just targeting victims and taking advantage of them in a very low point. There's no way this correlates with that. I imagine that would feel pretty fucking grimy as a defense to have to kind of use that angle. Especially when we're talking about people so young, 15, 26 years old. And it's no, clearly this is a guy who's he's preying upon people. Let's see. I'm going to read a quote here. This case, driven by selfish motives such as sexual and financial gratification, resulted in the deaths of 9 individuals over 2 months, a deeply serious incident that has caused shock and anxiety across society. I understand it is especially heartbreaking case for both the victims and their families, Justice Minister Kisuke Suzuki told reporters Friday at a press conference. Let's see. Shiraishi's execution is the first the country has seen since July of 2022. So, kind of closing out on this part of it, y'all know how I feel about the death penalty. I still feel the same on this case, as I'm pretty much going to on pretty much all of them. That being said, do I understand how we get here? Yes, because you have the valves, you have the buttons to push to say, hey, we can just run this all the way up and have this guy executed. And then you hear the fucking, case and you go, okay, you can just kind of let your impulse take you there and say, all right, we're going to use this. But do I think that this does anything better for society? Does it fix or cleanse anything? No, it doesn't. I don't know truly what solace it brings. I imagine that goes into the families, and that's up to them and how they feel about that. Those affected. But all the same, I do find it unfortunate this is still a thing that's being used, whether it's in America, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in any country. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, just closing out with that. But obviously, very fucked up, very sad situation. And also crazy that he used social media the way that he did, right? This wasn't some random full, niche site or anything like this. It was Twitter he was using. So, yeah. Anyway, our last bit is going to be a big grand wrap up, a bit of a Supreme Court crunch wrap, if you will. So we're going to go ahead and take our last break, and we'll just run through a good amount of Supreme Court cases that they wanted to kind of just close out the week with. I hope I'm getting them all here. If I miss some, then, so it goes. But yeah, let's go ahead and take our last break, and we'll close it out. All right. From NPR. The Supreme Court gives Trump a wave of victories in a blockbuster final week. I feel like it's weird to use the word blockbuster when we're talking about the Supreme Court, but I understand. This is politically nerdy shit. Anywho, the Supreme Court term has given the Trump administration a series of major wins in the final blockbuster week of its term. We rounded up the final decisions in one place with more information and links to read the full decisions and our full coverage. So it's worth noting that for each of these, they do have like a full readout, like almost like a PDF style of the decision, and then also their story on said decision. Supreme Court limits nationwide injunctions in birthright citizenship order. The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision along ideological lines on Friday, sided with the Trump administration's request to limit universal injunctions issued by federal courts. The opinion in the birthright citizenship was highly anticipated. Universal injunctions likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to federal courts, the conservative majority said, sending the case back to lower courts to reconsider their broad orders. However, the opinion also blocked Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship from taking effect for 30 days while litigation continues. So I don't like this. It's bad, in my opinion. Essentially, you are allowing him to do this without saying, hey, we're okay with you doing it. Like, it's one of those in runs that this conservative majority is kind of using here. Because birthright citizenship is something that should be unalienable. But essentially, Trump is trying to override that. You know, it's one of the many things he came out swinging with, flooding the zone, if you will. So I don't like that, even with the focus of saying, well, hey, we just don't think that the federal courts had the authority to do this, and we have to, make sure that's reined in. It's like, no, I think they were fine to stop this shit. I think this was a very big thing, and I think it should be paused so that you can go through channels to be like, hey, let's make sure that this is the right thing to do and go ahead with. I don't care if he's our elected official or fucking not. Like, that's why we have these checks and balances amongst the three fucking branches. But hey, so it fucking goes. The Supreme Court said, no, let's knock that down and let's kick it back and let's, I guess, see what happens. So I do think this is, definitely a bad setback, for America. But let's continue. There's more. Parents can opt kids out of classes with LGBTQ book characters. Wading into another culture clash, the Supreme Court on Friday ruled that school systems for now are required to provide parents with an opt-out provision that excuses their children from class when course material conflicts with their religious beliefs. The vote was 6-3 along ideological lines. This is a story we covered a bit back. I don't like this ruling, especially because of the fact that we were talking about public schools, right? I think it's one thing if we're talking about a private school, you can, run down the brochure and say, hey, does this school align with my beliefs and da-da-da-da, and then you can kind of plan accordingly. You can put your money where your fucking mouth is, whatever. But when you're in the situation of a public school, you're essentially saying, hey, my kid shouldn't have to run into this social issue. I don't like that. They shouldn't have to deal with that. They shouldn't have to, quote unquote, grapple with that. I don't want to confuse my kid, yada, 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 yada. But it's like, you're in a public school. You're going to meet people who are different from you, like with different backgrounds, different beliefs. Like, I find that so crazy to try to marshal that and try to corral that. And you can say, hey, well, we're just doing the opt-out thing, but that is a very disruptive thing to do to the education process. It's not a nothing burger. It's not. It has a ripple effect, is what I guess I'm trying to say, and it just makes it to a point where you have a situation where they have to go, do we just take this out of the curriculum because it might just literally be too disruptive for our school program, and that's not how this should be. That's not how books and conversations and stuff I feel like should be regulated in school, especially once again public school. So yeah, I'm upset about that ruling. No surprises. Supreme Court upholds key Obamacare measure on preventative care. The Supreme Court on Friday upheld a key provision of the Affordable Care Act, ensuring, at least for now, that some 150 million people will continue getting many free preventative services under the act. The vote was 6-3 with Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh joining the court's 3 liberal justices and the majority. So this is a switch up. Siding with the government on Friday, the court upheld the Affordable Care Act, allowing the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force to continue determining which services will be available free of cost to Americans covered by the Affordable Care Act. So, I think this was a good thing. I mean, who knows how long it's going to hold up, if they're going to, try to have it attacked from another angle, another way. Conservatives really fucking hate Obamacare, which even as it is a very limited thing. It's not like it's actual like social, like universal health care. It's just a bit of it. It's just a bit more, social spending on your government, into the social infrastructure, whatever the fuck. I'm wording this like ass, but you know what I mean. And essentially they've been poo-pooing it since it's been a thing. But they also know that if they just completely just floor yank it, then people are going to be on their ass. Their own constituents will be on their ass and need help. And then what are they going to fucking do? So, I feel like they always have this kind of problem where they want to scream from the rooftops to get rid of it, but then also they secretly want to keep it in place, as much as they can. So, there's that little dance, playing out in front of our eyes. Let's see, our next one. Supreme Court sides with Texas age verification law for porn sites. The U.S. Supreme Court on Friday upheld a Texas law requiring consumers to provide age verification in order to gain access to commercial websites that provide sexually explicit material. It was the first time that the court has imposed requirements on adult consumers in order to protect minors from having such access. Free speech advocates argued that while the law's goal is to limit minors' access to sexually explicit content, it is overly vague and imposes significant burdens on adults' access to constitutionally protected expression. Lawyers for Texas said in their filing and during arguments that the law's opponents had failed to show a single person whose rights had been chilled by it. A vote 6-3 along ideological lines. The court agreed with Texas, saying the law only incidentally burdened the protected speech of adults. Another ruling I'm not the biggest fan of. I think if it does help the kids, truly, honestly, then great. But I do feel like there's going to be end runs around this, either like with like something like a VPN or just saying, hey, if it's just an age check or whatever it is, people can just enter those buttons in. And I think there was more to it. I think you had to get a license or some kind of other ways of checking it, like a third party or something. But either way, that's just more of a drain to try to do what? Do something that's like a prohibition-esque thing on pornography. I don't know. I mean, we'll see how it unfolds. I personally don't love it, but if it is helpful for stopping kids from getting access to this kind of stuff, then obviously good. But I would definitely say a little bit of a boo there. Let's see. The next one. Supreme Court upholds program providing internet access to rural Americans. I feel like I say rural funny. I feel like that's like one of my Midwestern things is I say rural funny. But I do say oil and not oil. And I say pillow and not pillow. So there's that. The Supreme Court on Friday upheld a program providing subsidized internet and phone service to underserved communities across the United States. The vote was 6-3. The conservative groups challenged the program, contending that that Congress exceeded its powers in enacting legislation that delegated to the Federal Communications Commission the task of operating the Universal Service Fund, a program that provides subsidized telephone and internet services to rural healthcare providers, schools, and libraries, and low-income Americans. But the Supreme Court rejected that argument, writing for the six-member court majority. Justice Elena Kagan said Congress's delegation to the FCC didn't violate the Constitution. Let's see here. And there's one more I wanted to hit. The U.S. Supreme Court on Friday said it would re-argue Louisiana's congressional redistricting plan in its next term after the summer. At issue is the Louisiana's legislature's creation of a black majority congressional district. a group of non-African American voters sued, claiming the district was an illegal racial gerrymander. Opponents of the redistricting argued that the state legislature had unconstitutionally relied on race in drawing new congressional district lines. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. I'll have maybe some more opinions that I'll unload then. But yeah, I mean, let's see. I guess I really didn't have too many opinions on this one. Seems confusing, at least in terms of the. I'm going back to the rural thing. I kind of just skimmed over that, but let's see. The last thing that they had though was the Supreme Court upholds South Carolina's ban on Medicaid funds for Planned Parenthood. We covered that yesterday, so no need to really reiterate that. So yeah, I mean that's more or less the wrap up for SCOTUS. It seems for the season. Seems like SCOTUS season is over now, so that's kind of nice. I can kind of get back to just the normal articles that don't make my head hurt as much. But yeah, that's gonna be where we will also call it for today. We're gonna call it an episode there. Let's see, if you'd like to help out, support the effort, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/IsaiahNews. If you'd like to hit me up the freeway, IsaiahNews1@gmail.com. Feel free to follow me or the podcast on any of the socials. Subscribe to the YouTube. Follow on TikTok. Follow on Spotify. Follow on Apple Podcasts. Whatever platform you like. Leave a like. Leave a cool comment. Sharing is caring for each episode. It's just nice. It's helpful. Good for my algorithm. But really, I just appreciate you just listening. Just checking in. That's always nice. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for being a friend. And hopefully I see you soon for some more good news. I love ya. Bye-bye. Mwah.